What is up, ladies and gentlemen? But most of all, you ladies out there, thanks for clicking on another episode of Break the Silence. I am your host, Cyborg. The Phoenix Suns are in shambles. Let's talk about it. Split cow! We are about 2 weeks away from the start of the NBA season, and I couldn't be more excited. We're going to get serious. We're going to buckle down because we got so much to talk about before this season starts. I want to talk about the Heat and that Tyler Hero contract and break the Heat down a little bit. And today I want to talk about the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns lost yesterday to the Adelaide 36ers. And I hope I'm saying Adelaide correctly. Not 1,000,000% sure their name, mostly because they're not an NBA team. They lost 134 to 124. Now, you might look at me and say, it's not a big deal, it's preseason. But then you think about it a little more and realize that the Suns are the first team to lose to a non-NBA team since 2016. So this is not just something that happens. You don't just lose preseason games to non-NBA teams just because it's the preseason. And that game actually was the Thunder in 2016 when they lost to Luka Doncic. No shame in losing to Luka Doncic because he's an absolute stud. But I want to talk about this for a minute because I think the Phoenix Suns are a fascinating team to talk about and break down a little bit because of their success they've had over the last 2 years and what really seems to be a mess of an offseason. We had big Deandre Ayton quotes the other day, Monty Williams, and we're going to break a lot of that down. But let's first start with this game in particular because I think or worry that this could be a trend going forward for the Phoenix Suns. Now, you don't want to read too much into the preseason, obviously. But I think with all the other concerns, I think we should at least talk about it and look at it a little bit. So they lost 134 to 124. First, please take a second to like and subscribe to the channel. We are so close to 400 subs. We're hopefully going to hit it here in the next couple days. So please take a second to like and subscribe before we grind for the season to start. I know you're all pumped for NBA basketball. I'm so pumped for NBA basketball. And we got a lot to talk about. So join the party. Craig Randall yesterday. Craig Randall, not Julius Randall, not Randall from Monsters, Inc. Craig Randall gave the Suns 35 points. And it's not like the Suns starters didn't play. They played 22 minutes. I mean, that's almost half the game. So the Suns starters actually played in this game. And Craig Randall gave them a little bit of the business. And I wish, so here's the thing that I think you can take from yesterday's game. The way the Suns played defense, and specifically Deandre Ayton, was so uninspired. And then when you look at his comments where, if you saw his press conference the other day, they said, hey, Deandre, have you talked to Monty Williams? Said he has not spoken to his coach since the loss in Game 7 against the Dallas Mavericks. Now, I think this is a big deal. And then they asked him, hey, do you want to be in Phoenix? And he said, yeah, I might. Not overly convincing to me. They asked Monty Williams, why have you not spoken to Deandre Ayton? And his answer was basically he wanted to give his players time and wanted to give them space after the tough loss and after they had kind of had 2 long seasons in a row. You know, I don't know. I think to me, if you're a coach and you have beef with one of your players, I think that's something you kind of want to address, especially one that was going into free agency if you want him to stay. Now, I got my Suns jersey on, and I'm not here hating on the Suns by any means. In fact, growing up watching Steve Nash was one of my favorite players. So what I want to do is evaluate every team fairly, and I want to break them down and look at it because the Suns here's what I worry. There are losses. There are losing in series, and then there are devastating losses. Let me give you an example. The Seattle Seahawks made and won the Super Bowl against the Broncos. They then made it again against the New England Patriots, if you remember when Russell Wilson threw a pick on the 1-yard line. that was not only a loss, but a devastating franchise-altering loss in which players didn't want to play for Pete Carroll anymore because they felt like he favored Russell Wilson. A lot of players didn't like Russell Wilson anymore, and you still hear them speak out against him. And it really just completely broke down the organization to the point where they were never real contenders again. Obviously up to this point. And it's been years. And now they're clearly at a rebuild, although Geno Smith is balling up there in Seattle. But that's what I fear when you're talking about the Phoenix Suns this year, because not only did they lose, they got almost humiliated in Game 7, especially after kind of mocking Luka. And then he had that comment where he said, everyone laughing and having fun when they're up, and then he came back and kind of destroyed them. And there's been so many memes made of Luka being, the Suns owner, all sorts of things like that. So there's losses, and then there's franchise-altering losses. And to me, it felt like it could have been one of those franchise-altering losses. And that's what I fear for the Phoenix Suns, because Monty Williams, if you remember, almost benched Deandre Ayton, didn't play him much in that Game 7 because there was something going on between those two. And that's really, that's tough. I think that's something very hard to recover from, but you have to talk to recover from something like that. If Monty Williams and DeAndre Ayton truly haven't talked, that's really not a good look. And I'm someone who's a big Monty Williams fan. I think he's an excellent, excellent coach. And I think Chris Paul is an excellent player. But not only that, Jay Crowder is now demanding out, and it doesn't sound like he's going to be with the Suns next year. And Cam Johnson, it didn't give him an extension this offseason. So you're talking about a team with so much offseason drama. When you're looking at the NBA this year, there are 3 teams that really dealt with a ton of offseason problems. That's the Phoenix Suns, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Boston Celtics. Now, there are multiple ways you could respond to that. The Celtics with your coaching issue, obviously with the Ime Udoka things, that could bring the team together potentially. We don't know. We'll see what happens this season, but it's something that could, or the Jaylen Brown trade rumors could really tear them apart, make it feel like Brown versus Tatum, that they're trying to prove something. And I fear that a little bit. The Nets, obviously, they're just a mess with what's going on, but they got a lot of talent. Maybe they bring that together. The Suns didn't really add anybody. In fact, losing Jay Crowder, losing Cam Johnson, or not losing Cam Johnson, but losing Jay Crowder, and then I think they lost JaVale McGee as well. I want to say he went to the Nuggets, if I'm correct about that. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 1,000,000% sure. But the other comparison in the NBA you're kind of looking at is the Utah Jazz from a couple years ago. They were the number 1 seed. They were playing the Clippers. Kawhi Leonard goes down, and it feels like the Jazz have a real chance to compete for a title or at least make the NBA Finals. And you heard some tension between Gobert and Donovan Mitchell after the whole COVID mess, when Gobert had that moment where he touched all the microphones. The Jazz, and then it was kind of one of those things where it's like where there's smoke, there's fire. And, they kind of denied it a little bit. And then this season, it felt like they really just took a step back. Not that they were a bad team, not that they didn't make the playoffs, but they weren't real contenders this season. And I feel like that's what we're going to see from the Phoenix Suns. Not that they'll completely miss the playoffs, anything like that, but I think the Phoenix Suns maybe drop from the 1 seed, maybe to the 4 seed. And at the 4 seed, you're maybe not that true contender because you start to see some of those problems. You start to have beef. I wouldn't be 1,000,000% shocked if they even traded DeAndre Ayton. Now, when they re-signed him, here's what you got to remember. The reason that the Suns re-signed DeAndre Ayton is because you can't lose a first overall pick and a guy who's talented for nothing. So the Suns matching that restricted offer doesn't necessarily mean that they have Ayton in their long-term plans or that he wanted to be in Phoenix. What it could mean is that once that 6-month mark's hit, and I think that's about mid-season, maybe they look to trade him then, because even if you don't get as much from him as you'd like, still getting something back for him is a positive. And that's where, when you look at the way that the Golden State Warriors when they lost Kevin Durant to Brooklyn, they did it in I think it was a sign-in trade, but they got D'Angelo Russell back, which they then turned into Andrew Wiggins, which turned out to be a very valuable asset for them winning a title. So that's what you're hoping for if you're the Phoenix Suns. Not that you get equal value on the dollar, because obviously getting D'Angelo Russell for Kevin Durant's not equal value, but it does help you potentially get assets to where you can stay a contender. So that's what I think you're going to see from the Phoenix Suns. Maybe they don't trade him, but I think that you're legitimately looking at can you repair this relationship between DeAndre Ayton and Monty Williams? And if you can't, let's see if I can get something for him. It doesn't have to be a lot, and it probably won't be a lot. Not a lot of teams are lining up to trade for a center. It's just a reality of the league nowadays, unless it's Embiid or Jokic. But that's just kind of the reality of it. And it'll be really interesting to watch the Suns this year. I enjoy watching the Suns play basketball. They play a fun brand of basketball to watch. You have the way that Chris Paul, Booker, and Ayton those three guys can be a nasty tandem when they use that Spain pick and roll, which I'll break down in a future video. But look it up if you're interested in it. This is called a Spain pick and roll. That's very, very hard to guard, and the Suns use it more than any team in the NBA. But we'll see what happens with the Suns this year. My prediction is probably that they're somewhere around the 4 seed, but my official predictions will come out here in a couple weeks. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We're going to keep growing. We're going to keep grinding. We're going to talk about some other NBA teams. Plan to talk about this Tyler Hero contract probably tomorrow. So, like I said, please take a second to like and subscribe. Sotto Balls Out.